Hello, you're listening to Politics, a Harry Potter reread podcast focusing on politics in the wizarding world. As always, I'm Adri, your host, or, one of your hosts, and a recovering English major who is just tired. That's it. I'm just tired.
Yeah. I'm Helene, your other co-host, producer, and human that's realizing that I definitely have a morning voice after listening to these last two recordings. Yeah, I definitely sound different in the morning.
Well, it's because you're just like fresh and you haven't had to yell at anyone all day.
Yeah. That and my sinuses, I guess, are just waking up because I always feel like I sound super congested in these morning recordings. But I don't feel congested. I don't know. It's weird.
It's just your morning voice, Helene.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, today we're going to be talking about Chapter 36, titled The Only One He Ever Feared, from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix.
Yes, this is such a fun one. That was sarcasm, listeners. This is the one where Harry begrudgingly accepts that Sirius is gone and attacks Bellatrix out of rage in an attempt to avenge his murder. Voldemort then appears at the Ministry and loses a duel with Dumbledore that ultimately ends with Voldemort possessing Harry and Fudge finally witnessing and admitting the Dark Lord's return.
Oh, boy. He had to be slapped in the face with that one to admit it, right?
Yeah. Yep. Gotta see it to believe it, I guess.
What a doubting Thomas Fudge was. And this is the place where we thank our lovely patrons for keeping this podcast afloat. If you, like all of our lovely patrons, like to have a good time and listen to extra bonus content of the episode and perhaps get some nice goodies in the mail every 3 months, head over to patreon.com/Occhiopolitics and support our podcast.
Yes, $2 a month is going to get you access to bonus content for every episode, and then $5 and $10 a month tiers are going to get you some sweet, sweet physical rewards every 3 months.
And access to our super secret Facebook group.
Yes.
We can't forget that one.
No, cannot. No, it's like my favorite part, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yes, absolutely. You're cracking me up with all your memes. It's the greatest. Speaking of exclusive content, let's talk about what we're going to be talking about today for patrons only. As we know, May is usually the month where we think about our mothers more than we usually do. So we are going to be talking about other mothers in the wizarding world. We've already covered luminaries such as Mrs. Weasley and Professor McGonagall. But now, we're not doing any luminaries any favors here, because today we're covering the not so popular Narcissa Malfoy and Petunia Dursley, which, I mean, one is a muggle, one is a witch, but that's kind of where the differences end for me, at least. And, they may be awful people, but they are mothers who also took care of their one child, I guess. Question mark.
I thought you were going to read what I wrote. I wanted to see if you were going to read what I wrote in the doc.
No, I am not. I am not. Well, you can say it if you want to. You wrote it.
I wrote, they may be awful people, but you can't deny that they are mothers who pushed people out of their no-no squares.
I am glad that you crack yourself up.
Oh, man. I honestly really wanted you to read it.
Helene, I don't know if you know this, but I actually read before I speak. So.
Darn it. Anyway, it is now time for our Potter Watch segment where we discuss some of the latest news in the United States.
We have a regular Fred and George Weasley over here. Ooh, breaking news. No squares. Really, Helene?
Yep. Those are the words I chose.
All right. Potter Watch. Okay, let's talk about political news in the United States. One of Matt Gaetz' associates, Matt Gaetz is from Florida, you know, the guy who has penchant for underage girls.
Yeah.
And paying them for sexual favors. Kind of like a la Jeffrey Epstein. His associate, Joel Greenberg, pled guilty to 6 federal charges.
Oof. What are those charges?
So it says, Joel Greenberg has now confessed to falsely accusing an innocent man of having sex with a minor. He'll said in a statement on Monday, the plea agreement, Greenberg admitting to falsely accusing a Florida teacher of having sex with a student in 2019. Greenberg allegedly targeted the teacher after he filed paperwork to oppose Greenberg for county tax collector.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. He also has other sex charges filed against him. Ooh, the plea agreement's really long. Well, so, you know, just being a creep, I'm pretty sure summarizes all 6. Can we say that?
Yeah, that's probably accurate.
Just he pled guilty to being a creep, and it's not looking good for Matt Gaetz. And I hope that this plea agreement means that he's going to, you know, flip on Gaetz.
I'm pretty sure it means that. But we shall see.
We shall see. Anything else that you want to cover, my friend?
No, this was the news story that stood out to me, and I went to go add it to the doc, and it was already there. So we were on the same page with that.
Just Republicans being Republicans, and also, I don't know. Ooh, it says here also another news item. Giuliani is trying to say that trial by combat didn't mean insurrection. Oh, Rudy, come on, dude.
The excuses that Republicans are coming up with for this, like, insurrection is not an insurrection bullshit is just it's just so they're like
we didn't say literally go and insurrect on the Capitol, so clearly we're innocent.
Well, no, they're like Mr. Fantastic with all the stretching here. Like,
look at you. Beautiful. That was
just
beautiful.
Gotta love a good Fantastic Four reference.
Well, speaking of stretches, I think it's time for our Hogwarts Debate Club, where we talk about the politic that we thought was relevant or prevalent in the chapter. How about you start us off, Helene? What was your politic?
Sure. So, my politic, I went with retributive justice. So, retributive justice is a theory of punishment that when an offender breaks the law, justice requires that they suffer in return, and that the response to a crime is proportional to the offense. So, in some cases,
so an eye for an eye.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So in some cases, it would call for, you know, an eye for an eye, which I guess can be translated to, like, you know, if you murdered someone, then you die, aka the death penalty. But in this case, I kind of am using it in more of like those who have been wronged. So in the chapter, those who have been wronged, not wrong, but those who have been wronged. So Harry and Dumbledore in this chapter would rather their wrongdoers suffer for what they've done. I also I workshopped like vengeance or retribution or avenging. But retributive justice it's like more in the political vein. And it kind of, it's pretty similar to those things.
Yeah, no, I get that. So it's more about like not literal justice of, well, if you killed someone, right, like you die, like you said, but it's more like the effect of you killing someone was, I don't know, really great, like, you know, like measuring how great of a loss that was to society, and then punishing them in accordance to the magnitude, rather than like the offense.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, instead of like killing them for killing someone else, we're making them suffer in other ways, so that they are alive to, pay the price of what they did.
Or
But not,
learn the lesson, as it were.
yes, but not just like send them to jail. You know, that kind of justice. But so, for example, Harry wants Bellatrix to pay and suffer for killing Sirius in this chapter, and he attempts to use Crucio to torture her as opposed to just trying to kill her or letting her go,
Mm-hmm.
and like just be caught or handled by someone else. And then Dumbledore and Voldemort have a discussion about death in this chapter as a punishment, and Dumbledore tries to tell Voldemort that there are worse fates, even though Voldemort is pretty, set in his ways that death is like the ultimate punishment. Dumbledore doesn't think so. So,
Yeah.
what
Well,
about you?
so for me, I listened to the chapter twice, and I was trying to figure out what mine was going to be.
It was a bit difficult this time.
Yeah. And what I caught on, like my brain caught on, was like all these references to pain, physical, emotional, and otherwise. So my politics obviously is the politic of pain. And when I think about the politics of pain, I think about like there's the pain that can be caused by individuals. There's pain that can be caused by the political machinery or the system with, its levers. So it might be pain that was, from systematic oppression or from perhaps a law that had some unintended consequences, right? And like self-inflicted pain. So when I think about the politics of pain, it's not how we feel the pain, but how we live despite it that defines who we are. Because pain can break a person, it can cause shame and perpetuate the cycle of guilt and shame. And the shame can lead to an abundant self pity, which is where we get in trouble,
Hmm.
because self pity can be more corrosive than pain itself. It feeds on you, like on the parts of you, at the expense of feeling like righteous and right. So, like saying, like,
Hmm.
kind of like, I think about self pity as a Voldemort trait. And I know that that doesn't
Hmm.
quite, isn't really quite what we think about when we think about Voldemort at first. But think
Hmm.
about, like, he thinks, like, I am owed all these things and I am not there yet. Therefore, there is something wrong with society, not me.
Yeah.
Kind of also like Snape is
I was
someone who
just
feels a
yeah,
lot of
I
self-pity.
was just about to say that because we kind of see, like, if I always like to look at Snape and Harry as like two sides of the same coin, because
Mhm.
they both suffered a lot of pain in their childhood. Harry losing his parents, growing up in an abusive household. Snape also growing up in an abusive household. I think his parents were still alive, but his father was an abusive piece of crap.
Yeah.
Um, and they both um, experienced this awful pain, but we kind of get to see the two sides of this coin of pain that you kind of mentioned, where the pain made Harry like a stronger person, and he like built himself off of that and like used that pain and emotion to like help others,
Mhm.
and it eroded Snape and made him a weaker person and a worse person, because it allowed him to live in that cycle of self-pity and take his pain out on others.
Well, and also living on in the past, right? Because Harry, we know, has felt a lot of emotional and physical pain throughout his journey, but
Mhm.
he, while those things still haunt him, he's not living in the past. Self pity means, like, because of, like, we mentioned Snape is always living in the headspace of James took Lily away from me, but like ignores all the other things that he did to drive his friendship with Lily to,
Yeah.
to a fate of, like, you know Grand Canyon proportions,
Yeah.
leapt into the Grand Canyon, that friendship. But also Voldemort, because his entire conversation with Dumbledore during the chapter is about self-pity that is that is veiled as arrogance.
Yeah.
And,
Voldemort does a really good job at hiding his pain. Well, in the fact that he doesn't make it look like pain when it really
yeah,
is.
he makes it look like rage and
Yeah.
competence and I'm better than you guys. But in order to like feel that arrogance, right?
Mm-hmm.
He must feel like he is wronged by society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think we've gotten a little bit in depth. So let's go into our quarter moment that we thought kind of represented this politics. So what about you, Helene? What was the quote that you were like, yeah, this is retributive justice?
Yeah, so in the first part, I alluded to a discussion that Voldemort and Dumbledore have about death.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read part of that right now. The quote is, "You do not wish to kill me, Dumbledore," called Voldemort, his scarlet eyes narrowed over the top of the shield. "Above such brutality, are you?" "We both know that there are other ways of destroying a man, Tom," Dumbledore said calmly, continuing to walk towards Voldemort as though he had not a fear in the world, as though nothing had happened to interrupt his stroll up the hall. "Merely taking your life would not satisfy me, I admit." So yeah, I mean it shows that Dumbledore is really out for retributive justice right now. Voldemort he doesn't want Voldemort to die right now. He wants him to pay with something other than his life. And in the end he wants Voldemort to die. That's what he's doing, is he's making it so that Harry is one day ready to kill Voldemort. But in this moment, he doesn't seem to want him dead. He wants him to suffer.
Yeah. Actually, Helene, you're gonna laugh, but that was gonna be my quote, and then I was like, God damn it.
Oh man, well, what did you come up with instead?
All right, so because you took away my quote,
It's a good quote.
it's a fantastic quote because it's also like the if you could think about like a quote that sums up the chapter, right? Like the iconic quote of this chapter. It's that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
literally that. All right, so my quote comes at the beginning of the chapter because Helene is excellent at picking quotes. This is what it said. There was movement going on around them, pointless bustling, the flashes of more spells. To Harry, it was meaningless noise. The deflected curses flying past them did not matter. Nothing mattered, except that Lupin stopped pretending that Sirius, who was standing feet from them behind that old curtain, was going to emerge at any moment, shaking back his dark hair and eager to re-enter the battle. And that is that moment of searing pain that
And
Harry feels
denial.
in denial at the beginning of the chapter.
Yeah.
Kind of mirrored later on in the chapter when Voldemort possesses him and then he feels a different kind of pain.
Oh, we'll get to that. That's my Dementor.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to also shout out that point because that's where pain is used like 10,000 times in that
Yeah.
paragraph.
Yeah. It's really difficult to see that, and I for some reason remember Harry's denial lasting longer than it did.
Yes,
Because
same here. Maybe
not
it's
too long
because
after this, he's just like, okay, yep, Sirius is dead. I gotta go kill Bellatrix now. Like.
yeah, maybe it's because it starts in the previous chapter, Helene,
Mm-hmm.
and then it kind of
Maybe.
carries over to this one, and then he's like, okay, gotta go after Bellatrix.
Yeah, it's a difficult chapter, man. Heavy on the
Yeah,
emotions.
so many emotions. Although, like, I've always felt like in that chapter when I read it, like the entrance of Dumbledore is fantastic.
Oh my god.
Just everything. But okay, speaking of characters, tell me about the character you thought was like,
Yeah, so it's actually pretty poignant because we were just talking about his style. So, my character for retributive justice in this chapter is Harry, because his first reaction to Sirius's death after his denial, was immediately to punish the person responsible and enact his own form of justice and vengeance. And this is the first time where we really see Harry willing to kind of play dirty.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
he instead of going to his default spell of Expelliarmus, he actually tries to physically torture Bellatrix, which I kind of think is a little out of character, but in this specific moment, I can see it making sense.
Also, he used stupefy as well,
Yeah,
and not one mention of Expelliarmus, so he was not in his right mind.
yeah. His pain, per your politic, was really taking over at that moment.
Well, I know. So, I mean, for me, the character that we talked about how all these characters feel pain. But to me, the person who really exemplifies the politics of pain in a way that I am willing to endorse, right,
Hmm.
at this point in time is Dumbledore, because we know from later books, right, what Dumbledore's entire history has been, and it's fraught with pain, and it could have been, self-pitying or filled with shame, and I'm sure he felt those things at some point, but the way he rises above those, just like the phoenix rises from the ashes, might one
Mm.
say.
Ooh.
um just great callback to that phoenix. um is remarkable. He displays such poise and such skill, but also such empathy
I mean,
that, wow.
yeah, I actually would. I mean, I think about Dumbledore a lot because he's one of my favorite characters, and I think that a good driving force behind him is his shame. Honestly, I do think shame is a big part of what makes Dumbledore who he is, because it's the shame of the death of his sister Ariana, because he doesn't know if he played a part in it and what part he did play in that murder.
So
Um,
yeah, so I feel like maybe when I talk about shame, I think about shame as a like a catalyst. Like if you hold on to shame enough, it'll turn into self-pity, which is
I guess,
where we get Voldemort. So I
yeah,
think maybe Dumbledore did feel shame, but turned that shame into a lifelong lesson for himself.
yeah, but I do think it affects his daily actions as well, because I
Oh
mean,
no, yeah, for sure.
I think shame is the main reason that he isn't Minister of Magic, that he refuses to allow himself to gain more power, because he's
Well,
ashamed of what
yeah.
he did, and it's shame and fear. He's ashamed of what he did, and he's scared that if he allows himself to have that power that other people seem to want to put on him, that he will get worse, that he will not be a good leader, that he will, abuse that power.
Yeah, no, and I see what you're saying. I think from where I'm coming from is that if you hold on again, like if you hold on to shame, it infects you a little bit. So like
Yeah.
if you turn that shame into knowledge, right? So he has some self-knowledge about what he is capable of and
Hmm.
what he needs to stay away from. And he
Yeah.
does feel guilt and he does feel pain at
Hmm.
the thought of, losing his sister
Hmm.
and, being, even just friends with Grindelwald and, buying into his ideals. And so he really tries hard to not traffic in those ideas, to not become immersed in that like I guess like wizard supremacy notion. And that must be a lifelong journey that he has to take. Um, but maybe it's just kind of like how I understand shame is more about shame is okay to feel for a little bit, but if you don't do anything about it, it turns into something that is not helpful.
Yeah, I could see that.
How do you see your politic throughout the book, though?
Yeah, mine was difficult. I feel like the politic I chose is pretty specific to the events in this chapter. But when I did try to think about retributive justice throughout the book, the one thing that kept on coming to mind was Filch, because especially like under the leadership and I don't know, endorsement of Umbridge in this chapter, being the headmaster of Hogwarts. Um, Filch has this propensity towards corporal punishment and, punishing the students in a way that is equal to the crime or worse. Equal in his mind, I think worse. Corporal punishment is never really an equal punishment for what children do at school. But his idea of justice is physical punishment, and we do see that play out under Umbridge's reign.
Oh, definitely. So mine is a little bit similar to yours in the way that I see it throughout the book. Like, we see that this book in particular is one where Harry navigates pain and grief in the most real way we've seen so far.
Yeah.
He's coming to terms with Cedric's death and, you know, being with Cho, going on dates with Cho, or Cho being at Dumbledore's army, not quite helpful with that,
Nope.
because it kind of confuses him about his pain and his grief. At the same time, he's also feeling rejected by Dumbledore. Umbridge took away his position on the Quidditch team, which brought him, some semblance of normalcy and joy. And then, also Umbridge makes him write lines in the most physically painful way possible, like using his own blood, which, kind of to me harkens to Voldemort using Harry's blood to maybe come back to the living, as it were. And now he's lost Sirius.
Yeah. Yeah, this book is definitely very centric on pain, usually in the context of grief, but there is a lot of physical pain and other types of emotional pain that are not linked to grief as well in this book.
Yeah, no, if I kind of sat down and thought of the book through the lens of, pain or the politics of pain, I was just like, wow, like this book is really about pain and grief and loss
Which is
and
why I
coming to
think a lot of people
that.
don't like this book as much, right? Because it's a little too real. It's depressing. It's a downer sometimes, like
Yeah, I mean, he also has to come to terms with like the pain of, in his mind, being the person who attacked Arthur Weasley, in that dream,
yeah.
and the, being like, oh my gosh, like they almost lost his dad and I was there but I wasn't there, and like there's like social pain, there's familial pain, there's just so much going on.
Harry goes through a goddamn lot in this book.
I know.
Poor
My poor
guy.
baby boy.
But speaking of what Harry goes through in this book, I think we both picked some difficult moments for Harry in this chapter for our Dementors and our Dementors and Chocolate section. So, Adri, what was your Dementor? What didn't you particularly like about the chapter?
So my Ted Cruz, because this will never get old until he is voted out of office.
Even
And,
then, Ted Cruz will still be an awful human being, so I feel like it'll still be irrelevant.
yeah, but then, he's not legislating,
Mm-hmm.
on
Mm-hmm.
behalf of Texas. So
True, true, true.
I'm just, silver linings.
Yes.
And this is a Bellatrix moment, because of course. Come out, little Harry, she called in her mock baby voice, which echoed through off the polished wooden floors. What did you come after me for then? I thought you were here to avenge my dear cousin. I am, shouted Harry, and a score of ghostly Harrys seemed to chorus, I am, I am, I am, all around the room. Aw, did you love him, little baby Potter? Ugh, kills me. Kills me.
Yeah.
I hate her so much. To be so mocking. Ugh.
Yeah, she's so condescending throughout. I mean, every time we see her, she's extremely condescending. She's has a superiority complex, and I think mocking is like her love language or something. I don't know.
Well, then she gets panicked when, Voldemort's about to show up, so
Yeah, exactly.
whatever. Who's the baby now, Bellatrix? Who's the baby now?
She literally like balls at his feet, so like crying. So
Yeah, again, who's the baby now?
right.
How about you? What was your Ted Cruz?
So this week it was actually kind of similar to last week. So I remember last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where we talked about Harry's fascination with the veil kind of being a metaphor for like suicidal thoughts.
Well, he can also hear the voices that others
Yeah,
can't, which means he's
exactly.
like closer, like he's kind of like closer to death than the others.
Well, and he seems to be fascinated and like curious about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of like what the metaphor seemed to be, was that the veil is death, and he's curious and wants to kind of explore it, which is very,
Like he
yeah.
wants to gain, like he wants to gain knowledge of death, and the like other than like than the Voldemort way, which is to like avoid death as much as possible, right?
Yeah. Harry doesn't seem
It
as scared of it, at least in this
it's
moment.
basically like, oh, the only way to get knowledge about death is to die.
Yeah. So this one is similar because there's a brief moment in the chapter when Harry is being possessed by Voldemort, and he's literally begging Dumbledore to kill him. I didn't write down the quote. It was kind of just, it was difficult enough for me to read the quote a couple of times through myself. But
Mm-hmm.
so while he's being possessed, he's wanting Dumbledore to kill him. He's thinking about how if Dumbledore does kill him, then that would mean that he would get to be with Sirius.
Yes, that really jumped out at me as well.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the moment where Voldemort stopped possessing him too. Like he thinks about how he has this like moment of like relief at the thought of death, and that kind of seems to dissolve Voldemort's possession over him. That's like the catalyst for it. And I just reading that, it really, really like hit me really hard. I teared up reading that because I never really picked up on Harry's suicidal thoughts and tendencies before this reread. And it just makes me so sad. I think it deserves more attention than it gets in the book, because I mean, I've read these books God knows how many times, and I don't ever remember really absorbing the fact that in these last few chapters, Harry is really suicidal.
And reckless.
Yeah. He like there are moments where he wants to die.
Yes.
And not even just like metaphorically, but like literally in the
But
text,
remember, like,
textual evidence that he says that he wants to die.
but see, but
So,
that's the thing. Like, this book is filled with so much grief and pain
yeah.
that it's breaking Harry. Like, how much pain can you endure as a 15-year-old orphan who's been treated badly by his guardians, right?
Yeah.
And then put on like so much pressure by the wizarding community by being the boy who lived, um, winning the Triwizard tournament, but losing like an acquaintance, right? Like a fellow champion.
Yeah.
And you have to remind, like, you remember that loss every time you see the girl you have a crush on, who happened to be his girlfriend at the time. And then you factor in Umbridge, you factor in the loss of Dumbledore in his eyes, Hagrid's a fugitive now, like all these things that are falling apart for Harry in this book.
Yeah. Yeah, and it all kind of culminates in these last few chapters where you really, really see him struggling. And it kind of makes me think that maybe we should put like a content warning at the top of this episode or something,
I was just thinking that, yeah.
because this is a really, really difficult situation for people, and I I feel for Harry so much in this chapter. I just want to give him a big old hug.
I know. I know. Well, moving on from this, which like sucked the joy out of the entire conversation, can we
I'm
move on
sorry.
to like the chocolate?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let's move on to happier things. What is something that you really enjoyed or hold dear in the chapter?
Well, I have the same chocolate you have, which is
Mm.
the Dumbledore.
Oh my gosh, yes, Dumbledore and his straight up badassness coming in to save the day.
You know, I listen to the books, right?
Right.
Before the episodes and take notes. I was cackling listening to the book because of the moment where Voldemort goes, Dumbledore. It was
Mm.
hilarious. Wait,
Yeah.
I think I got it. Let me see if I can play it for you.
Oh, okay. You know exactly what time it's at?
I think I got it. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Dumbledore. Harry, look, Gates.
You're obviously
Well,
listening to that book at like 1.5 speed, I can tell.
1.7. Well, let me do like a 1 speed, okay?
Okay.
What? Said Voldemort, staring around. And then he breathed, Dumbledore.
You're right. It's better at 1 speed, for sure.
Oh God.
Dumbledore.
I was just laying there going, this is almost a comedy at this point.
Oh, man.
Dumbledore.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, rereading this chapter, I must just have, like, the book, or I mean, the movie scene just so embedded in my brain that this, like, it seemed a lot shorter and, like, more anticlimactic in the book than I remember. And I gotta say, I think that the movie really, really did this scene really well with their duel.
Well, yeah, because it's like in the film, it takes up more space.
Yeah,
than in the
and
book.
especially the possession. The possession was like over in like a snap, you know. And in the movie, I think, well, first of all, Daniel Radcliffe's acting performance in this movie, in Order of the Phoenix, deserves like all the Oscars. He's so good in this movie, and especially during like reacting to Sirius's death and during this possession scene. Whew, he's so talented.
I think we've done it. I think we've talked about Dementors and chocolate. So now it's time to go to our weekly question. Last week we asked, what moment in the series do you think defined Harry's loss of childlike innocence and why? We
Yes.
got some pretty good answers, I see.
Oh my god, we got some amazing answers. I'm so excited to read them. Okay. A couple people, Josie underscore Catherine underscore, yeah, Josie underscore at Catherine underscore on Instagram and Built on Stardust on Twitter both said Hedwig's death, which I had not thought of when we talked about that. So I was like, oh, you know what? That's a good answer because that is kind of like his last childhood, like part of him dying, right? And then Slytherin Reading Room on Instagram said when Sirius falls through the veil. So the contents of the last chapter we just read. And then we had some more in-depth answers from a couple of people. Most of these were on Instagram. So Decatur Wine Poet said, when Harry lays his hands on Professor Quirrell and burns him to death, it's not seen as a very pivotal moment, and it has no obvious lingering effects, which is either unrealistic or hints at an underlying or undiagnosed psychotic tendency within Harry. Maybe? Question mark?
Oh gosh.
Do you want to read the next one?
Well, sure. I can read. Can I read? Who knows?
Yes.
I don't know. Who knows?
I hope so.
All right. So Badadia on IG said, on one hand, he grew up with the Dursleys, so he came out to Hogwarts with a lot of experience about the dark side. True, very true. On the other hand, when Hedwig died, Harry lost something that stood for the innocence of childhood. Lots of possibilities here. That's, I mean, the Hedwig death scene is, quite
Yeah.
wrenching
Honestly,
in
if
both
it's
book and
not
movie versions.
yeah, if it's not like when Harry lost his childlike innocence, I feel like it's like when the readers started to lose. Like it's like a big thing for the readers to when Harry lost Hedwig.
Do you think it's more of like nothing is sacred anymore, even the
Right.
pet dies?
Well, it's kind of like it's like the loss of like the innocence of the first few books for us, right? Because like I don't know, I look back on like Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone, and I think fondly of Hedwig and Harry's love for Hedwig and their relationship, and then when you see her die, it's like, what? Like what?
Like, what? He can't even keep his damn owl alive? Like,
Yeah.
what is this, guys?
Yeah. Well, the next one is from Dream Quaffle on Instagram. He said, it was this moment from Half-Blood Prince. And this is the quote. And Harry saw very clearly as he sat there under the hot sun how people who cared about him and stood in front of him one by one, his mother, his father, his godfather, and finally Dumbledore, all determined to protect him. But now that was over. He could not let anybody else stand between him and Voldemort. He must abandon forever the illusion he ought to have lost at the age of 1, The shelter of a parent's arms meant that nothing could hurt him. There was no waking from this nightmare, no comforting whisper in the dark that he was safe, really, that it was all in his imagination. The last and greatest of his protectors had died, and he was more alone than he had ever been. Oh, I mean, this was a great quote. I can't wait to get to Half-Blood Prince. So basically, this, obviously, if you didn't pick up on it, this is at Dumbledore's funeral. And so Jeff, who is Dreamquaffle on Instagram, he is saying that the loss of Harry's innocence is at the death of Dumbledore, his last protector.
Yeah. I mean, I can also see that where it's kind of like the last layer of his innocence of things will turn out right because that's how it happens, you know?
Yeah.
It's stripped away with Dumbledore's death.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Galinxi on Instagram said, I'm thinking it's the moment he sees Hermione petrified in book 2. Up till then, he has scary encounters in a magical world where everything could be fixed and only quote-unquote bad people suffered after the war. Even the other petrified people were more like, ooh, mysteries and adventure. I want to know more. And then he sees Hermione and the look of worry in McGonagall's expression, and shit gets real because if not even the brightest witch of her age, Dumbledore and the Ministry can figure this one, there is a very big possibility that it's not all fun magic stuff with no real consequences.
I like that.
I like that a lot.
It's really unique. I like that read and that answer. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for giving us such great answers this week. I absolutely loved seeing all of this. It was so cool to hear what you guys had to say on the matter.
Yeah, and such different points in the series, you know? I love that.
That's why I liked this question a lot, because it literally could be so many different answers, and everybody does seem to have a different view on what that one moment, that defining moment was. So thanks,
and
guys.
I can see the case for all of these answers too.
Yeah, me too.
All right, so this week we want to know, inquiring minds want to know, why do you think Voldemort is so afraid of
Dumbledore?
That was perfect. I loved it. It's great.
I mean, if people have the audiobook, it is minute 11 second 54 55 of chapter 36.
Yes. I Jim Dale, there are things I absolutely love that he does and things that I am very annoyed that he does, but he does some things very well, I have to say.
The thing that he does not do very well is Hermione's voice, or, you know, female voices.
Yeah, I don't like Hermione's voice, especially the way that she says Harry's name. Harry.
Yeah. What a wet blanket.
That's my Jim Dale impression.
What a wet blanket that Hermione is.
Yeah, not a fan. But everything else, he does, he can make you giggle for sure when you're listening. So
I mean, it was my only laugh of the chapter, obviously.
Right. Yeah, this chapter is not full of laughs, that's for sure.
Well, speaking of things that we are fans of, let's talk about the media we've been consuming. Helene, when you are not talking about Harry Potter, reading Harry Potter, thinking about Harry Potter, what are you doing?
Sleeping. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, or working, I guess.
Yeah. No, so yeah, this week the media I've been consuming, I started watching the show The Circle on Netflix after listening to yours and Rex's episode. I know that you guys briefly talked about it, and I also had it recommended to me by another friend recently, and I was like, you know what? I'm in between shows right now. I'm kind of in the mood for something a little lighter. So I started watching it, and it is very, very interesting. I've been kind of addicted to it the last 2 days, and I am really enjoying it. It's a cool social experiment, and I kind of just can't wait to find out what happens. Have you started it yet or no?
Not yet. It's on my list. I've been Swamped is not the right word. Kind of like a truck has run over me and my to-do list kind of feeling.
Fair.
It's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem.
Yeah.
You know? So while I get my never-ending things of to-do items done, I listen to audiobooks on Libby. This is not the first time I'm saying this on the podcast. Libby is the greatest of all time because free audiobooks, yes. And as listeners may or may not know, I've made my way into the genre of historical Regency romances because, I don't know, because they're fun, I guess. And because it was something I used to look down on. And now I'm like, what a silly fool I was. And I have kind of started going through books by like the author's catalog, if that makes sense. You know, if you find some like a novel you really like, you're like, what else has this author done? And this month's author has been Eloisa James. So not sure if it's a pen name, probably a pen name, but she has so many books under her belt. And I'm just like, yes, there's a lot of books that I can get, you know, quote unquote read while I do all the chores.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds like fun.
That's the tweet.
Yeah.
Well, with that being said, that's it for today's episode. Join us next week as we talk about chapter 37 of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. This chapter is going to be titled because it's already written, The Lost Prophecy.
We haven't decided what we're going to name the chapter yet, you know, in a book that's over 20 years old. It's just like, you know, we got to figure it out.
You know, we just get the chapters as the author finishes them.
Well, if you've enjoyed this conversation, please take a second of your precious time to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you might be listening to this podcast right now. As I like to remind people, it definitely helps new listeners find our podcast, and we want to one day take over the world, and we can't do that if people aren't listening to the podcast. So please help us in our goal of world domination by giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
Did you just oust us as Pinky and the Brain?
Hell yeah.
Because
go watch Pinky and the Brain on Hulu, by the way.
Oh my god, the best. The best. Also, unlike my erstwhile father, Bill Gates, we are good people, so let us take over the world.
Yes. We promise we'll make it better when we do.
I promise not to sexually harass any of my employees.
Yes, exactly.
Unlike my once father, Bill Gates.
Sad day. Well, ready to end the episode on a downer. Anyway.
Yes, I have talents. They span multitudes. But until then, politics managed. Support this show by going to patreon.com/Occhiopolitics. Our patrons keep this show going. You can find us online at Occhiopolitics.com, and we are at Occhiopolitics on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can email us your thoughts at info@Occhiopolitics.com. Leave us a voicemail at 915-996-1699, and you might just hear yourself on the podcast. Adriana Wilson is the founder and creative director of the podcast. Helene Karp is the producer and social media manager. Allison Pullman is the audio wizard and editor who makes us sound so good. Cover art and physical rewards are designed by Adriana Wilson. The views expressed by the hosts and guests are expressly their own and not representative of their employers or associates. Occhiopolitics is part of the MuggleNet family of podcasts.